our absolute value things. Now, a couple of things I just wanted to review quick from yesterday that I put up there on the note. We'll keep referring back to this and bringing this back in as we're doing these. Whenever I'm doing absolute value, I need to make sure first that my absolute value is by itself on a side, that it's isolated. So like if I'm seeing a problem, let's say I get something that looks like, put this up here, let's say instead of this, my problem looks like this. Before I split that up, I'd need to go through and do an opposite, whatever the opposite that I need to do. Here I was multiplying, so I divide. And I'd get this by itself, then split it into two parts like we were doing yesterday. Or if there was a minus 2 to the side, I'd add 2 to both sides and then start. So I always got to make sure my absolute value is isolated. Once I do that, I'm going to have two equations. So with my two equations, I've got to do a couple of things here. First, thank you, I've got to make sure that I get a second answer that changes the sign. So in this particular case, I write exactly what I see the first time. And then for the second one, I change the sign of the answer. So nothing changes inside the absolute value. It's just that answer that's going to change. And then I solve this. So I do my minus 3. Okay. I'm good there. I do my minus 3. Okay. I'm good there. And I'm set. So it's not something that becomes too terribly bad when I'm doing this. Now, I'm going to give you a kickstart on one other one up here, and then I'll get our little note back up here. I'm going to go down to 4, because I think that's probably going to be the one that causes the most trouble. So I look at this, I'm like, okay, it's by itself, so I don't have to do anything fancy. So let me rewrite this, and then we'll see how we're going to deal with this. So leave it alone the first time. And the second time, again, I'm going to change the sign. So you're like, yuck, I don't like the fraction. Okay. If I don't like the fraction, here's one of my choices. And we'll kind of see which one of these things you like best. I'll do it a different way on each of these. We'll see how this goes. So since I only see one fraction with a 4, one option I would have is to multiply all the way through by 4 if I don't like the fraction. So I'd have to make sure I do it to every term. So 4 times 3 is 12. Divided by 4 would just be plain old 3. So that fraction's gone. But then I've got to make sure I multiply it all the way through. 4 times 2x is 8x. 4 times 2 is plain old 8. And now I solve what's left. And I can get fractions for answers. That's not a bad thing. So I get that guy situated. I don't leave myself enough room. Ha ha ha. And I divide by 8. Again, divide by what's with x. It's one thing we're still having some issues with here and there, but we'll get there. And I get that done. You're like, okay, that was all right. Well, what if I deal with the fraction? What if I say, okay, let me do this like a regular equation. I want to get 2x by itself. I'm going to minus the 3/4. Okay, here's how it works if we're going to go this route. This route scares me a little, but we'll try it out. So we decide we're going to bust out our handy-dandy calculator. So, here I can advertise for Texas Instruments a minute while we're doing this. There we go. So, if I'm going to go this route, I actually can use the calculator to help me out. So if I do -2 minus, and fractions, depending on your calculator, like on this particular one, I need to put it in parentheses. It's usually a safe bet. I don't want a decimal, though. So if I get here, and I'm like, oh, it's a decimal. Math, enter, enter. Okay. You're like, Harty, this is not looking good for you right now. So you're like, okay, well now what? Okay, what would I normally do? I'd divide by 2. So if I get here, now I take that 11/4. It's already in the calculator. Okay, if it isn't, I can always type it back in. Negative 11/4 divide by 2. Ooh, fraction again, don't like it. I don't care which way you use, whether you get rid of the fraction and then solve it with what you've got left, or if you use the calculator. But as you notice in the calculator, there's lots of details I gotta watch. I gotta use parentheses, I've gotta make sure I'm doing math enter and not just going to a decimal. So, I mean, there's good and bad to both, but just wanted to get some options out there for you. When we get down to 6 through 8, get the calculator out of the way here. Now we get a little bit different of a thing we're looking at. Okay, rewrite the absolute value inequality as a compound inequality, because you notice now with the absolute value in this, I'm going to have 2. So now, well, how do I figure out what it's going to look like? How do I figure out how to put and or in the middle? The arrow tells me everything. If the arrow's pointing at the absolute value, that's an and. Okay. And I would know how all this other stuff works, but I'm just being asked to rewrite it. If it's greater than, it's an or. So like on this one, I'm like, oh, it's an and. So I write it the first time, the way that I'm supposed to. Just copy it down, basically. I put and in the middle, because I always want that as a clue if I need to graph it later on what it's going to look like. And then remember, on the second part, there's 2 things I have to do. On the second inequality, I got to flip the arrow. So since the arrow was pointing that way, we'll switch it. And I have to change the sign of the second answer. Okay, for this part, that's all you've got to do. But you've got to get that and or in the middle. I want to know that you understand which one it is. And if you don't yet, you know, maybe jot this stuff down somewhere. I think we talked about it even a little bit yesterday when we were starting up the notes. So I'm going to keep this on here, so let me keep moving this down a bit. All right. Solve by showing work, then graph. We're going to take a look at the first couple here together. So I look at the first one. Is that first one an and or an or? It's an and, because it's less than. Okay. I like to just jot that on here so it reminds me. Because now I've got this picture in my brain. Okay, ands are the ones that come together in the middle. They got the really short interval notation. And I want to see that on this. I want to see the interval notation as well. So I go, okay, copy it, put my and in the middle. And again, the second one, I flip the arrow, I switch the sign. And then I solve what I have. So I'm like, okay, let's see here, 6, and again, leave your x where it's at, don't move it around. All right, so I get that one jotted down, and I go, well, let's see here. I've got, we'll just count by ones here. So I go, okay, x is less than, because again, arrow's pointing at x. It's like talking down to it, x, you are less than I am. Less than 6 means we're going left. With a parenthesis, because it's not or equal to. And then with the other side, x is greater than 4. Okay, x is bigger than 4. It's getting larger. So that would go to the right. And they come together, just like we thought they would. So then my interval notation, I remind myself, oh yeah, it's just the end points. Starting at the left at 4, ending at the right at 6. And that one's set. So you're like, okay, kind of see where you're going here. So then I look and I'm like, all right, 10 looks kind of similar, except now, since it's greater than, Greater than is going to be an or statement. Or statements are the big ones. They're the biggest graphs. They're the biggest interval notations. So this may take a slight bit longer here. Always remember to get your and or in the middle. Flip arrow, flip sign. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Working on getting my 3x alone. That 11's positive, so I got to minus it out of there. Like, okay, going well. What's my last step on this one? Divide by -3. Is there anything special about that? Yeah, we got to flip the arrow around. If we multiply or divide both sides by a negative, we got to flip the arrow. So, then I'm like 7 divided by 3. I don't think that comes out nice. It doesn't. And when we're doing these, this is one of those rare times that if we use a decimal, it's not as bad because it just helps us make our number line a little bit easier. Then we do the same thing to the other one. And again, hopefully we remembered all of our rules on the first one because it makes this one a lot easier. Because now, we're like, oh yeah, divide by a negative. Flip the arrow. Okay, I got this. And I just go back and say, all right, let's see. 1, 2. Get my numbers in. And I keep reminding myself, okay, this is an or. If I did this right, I think my arrows should go the opposite way when I do this. Let's see, 2.33. X is less than, arrow pointing at it. Less than goes left. Or X is greater than 5. Greater than, we know, goes right. Good deal. My arrows are going opposite directions, just like they're supposed to. And then my interval notation, again, left to right. Well, left is going and going and going forever. So negative infinity up to my first point here, 2.33. Use the same symbol that's on my graph. And then we're going to combine that. We use U for union. And then we start up again where the graph starts again. It starts at 5 and goes off forever to the right to infinity. So that's what we're on the lookout for when we're doing these. I'm just looking for a second here. There is one. No, there's 2 other things I want to do on the back. Let's head to the back next, and then if we got to come back with some absolute value things, we can. I want to help get you set up on a couple problems on the back. We're not going start to finish, but I want to get you started. Okay, the first one's 16. Because this is still with our... So, what we're going to do is we've got to look at this. We've got to figure out a way to get rid of the fraction. Now, we could sit and figure out, okay, if I started to count by 2s and 3s and 4s and 6s, I could go through that way, find my least common denominator, which would be 12 in this case. Or, if I'm like, that's a lot of things to figure out, can I do something else? You can. And I'm going to show you how this can kind of work out for us that way, even though the number's going to be big. So my other option, if I'm struggling with that part a little bit, is to take all the numbers that are different in the denominators. Well, they're all different this time. So I'm going to take these, and I'm going to multiply them together. Okay, I get 144. You're like, we're really going to multiply through by 144? We are. Because it's going to get rid of the fractions for us, which is our key here. So when I'm doing these, remember, all you do is you take this number times what's on top and then divide by the bottom. So 144 times 1 is 144. Divide by 4. So even if I'm using the calculator on one like this, it's not really going to take me that long. 144 times 2 divided by 3. Don't forget your signs. If there's a minus there, you got to take that with. And you'll see, yeah. You can. If you notice that right away and you're good with your LCDs and you can figure out that that's 12 and do it, I say do it because the numbers will be smaller. I just have had quite a few people come to me and say, I just don't get how you figure that out. Can I multiply them together? And this is just a way of saying, yes, you can. 44 divided by 2. But yeah, you absolutely can. 12 would make my numbers a lot smaller than what I'm ending up with here. But we'll both get to the same answer at the end. And so I'd get my x's together, I'd get my numbers to the other side, and I'd solve this. So again, don't avoid these. Don't try just straight dealing with the fraction and doing strange things. But go ahead and multiply through by one or the other. So now, here's the other one we are going to play with. We're going to play with 18 because it's one of those dreaded solve my equation for something problems. But then it goes a step further. So the volume for this cylinder, they give me the formula, so I don't have to know the formula. It says solve for H. So I want to get H on a side by itself. So I can actually do this in one step. All this stuff's being multiplied together because I don't see any pluses or minuses. What's the opposite of multiplying something? Divide. So we're going to divide, in this case, by all that stuff. So I'm like, okay, so V is pi r squared. Whoops. Yeah. No. Oh, Harty. Harty. We're solving for H. Why would I write that first? Because it's early in the morning and I messed up. All right. So I've got my H solved for. But then it goes further. How tall, what's H, in a cylindrical can with a radius 4, that's going to be my R, and a volume of 176, that's my V. So if they want me to take it a step further, I plug those two values in. Now, this is just me. I sit there at first and I go, okay, let's deal with what's down below first. Make sure we got this. You actually do have a pi button on most calculators, and even the ones we have in here. So I'm just going to deal with this bottom part first. So pi is second, and my caret button, second in this little up arrow. So times 4 squared. You're like, whoa. So 176 divided by, now if you don't want to type all that back out again, I wouldn't. You can have the calculator do this for you too by just hitting second and the negative button. That ANS just means it's going to take your prior answer, it's going to divide by it. And I may not get something that's real pretty. So 3.50. You're like, could I have just left it as a decimal and plugged it in? Like if I'd have done 176 divided by, I don't know, 50.27, would that, yeah, it's basically the same thing. So if you don't want to do the answer thing, if you just want to type in the first couple digits, you can. Okay? So at this point, I'm going to let you loose on your own for a bit. I've got the key up front. If there's something that's sticking you, talk to me, please. Okay, I'm going to float around a bit, but I'm not going to say like, ooh, you're having a problem. No, we got to start communicating some. Okay, I don't bite, I don't scream. I just want to kind of help out with some stuff on that. So kind of work some of that. If I can help, let me know.